Hi everyone, in this video we're gonna create a 3D Earth all on React with Three.js. So if you're actually a big fan of 3D renderings, especially on React itself with Three.js, and if you're not familiar with Three.js, it's pretty much like the mother of all 3D works on the browser. And if you're all interested in that, this basically video is for you. So we're gonna get started from scratch, just like setting up a project and getting started, of course, with getting actually our first scene and just like having it, space views in here with stars, and we can have our earth in here. Of course, we can control earth using mouse, and we can add some really cool lighting, like physically based lighting. As you can see here, like it all works really well with like how sun works and how like pretty much earth rotates. And this is all being rendered 60 FPS behind the scenes on the actual browser itself. So this is not a video. This is just basically being rendered in real time. So that's what we're going to be doing throughout this video. And of course, eventually we're going to create this not yet simple, but powerful and really cool, kind of like global warming, landing page for you guys, just to understand how to put all of that together with this like canvas and how to make it work all nicely together with 3D.js or with 3D work with Three.js and React and plus React Fiber. So stuff I'm going to be using, of course, obviously we're going to use Three.js in here. And of course, it's an awesome place. And of course, you can learn about it and how it works with all these awesome examples it provides on the homepage. And most importantly, we're going to use it with actually the bounding of React 3 Fiber. So this is going to allow us to use Three.js with React, and we're going to turn the declarative like vanilla JavaScript Three.js to use it with a components-based React ecosystem. And of course, we're going to render our scene using components. We're going to render everything using components, pretty much like meshes. We're going to render lines. We're going to render textures of our earth, and you can control it all using React. So that's the coolest part about all that. And we can have it all working in React with no bottleneck, with no performance issues, no downgrading performance or anything like that. It's going to work the same way as it would work on vanilla JavaScript with Three.js. Basically the same way. So that's going to be doing throughout the video. Hope you guys enjoy this one. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So let's go ahead and get started. And first things first, we want is actually to set up a project. And basically, we're going to be using create react.cli to get started and set up and create our React project. So as we always do, we pick up a terminal. So whatever your Windows, Mac, or Linux, you got a terminal there, and you can go ahead and like install the CLI of create react app if you've never set up a project, but hopefully you did. If you did not, just Google create react app and it's going to give it straightforward to the point. So all we need to do is go in and do create React app, and we need to provide it with npx. So just npx is going to just like provide this live for us. It's going to download it on the fly and execute it for us. So we're going to have it right over here, and we can name our projects whatever. I already created a project you're seeing here. I'm already inside of the projects, but I can name this like whatever, like React 3D or something. Click enter, and this is going to actually go in and install all dependencies for you, create the whole project, and boom, you're good to go. So I already did the whole steps in here, and already opened my favorite projects here throughout this code. So let me just going to close all of these just to go ahead and get started from scratch, and for you guys to be able to see everything on live. So here what we got is it's just a basic project. So you see I got the projects running already. So if I go into port 3000, which is run by default by Create React App, we get hello Three.js. So that's basically what we got for this project. It's a pretty simple project, and it doesn't have anything to go forward or say anything. Just pretty simple stuff, just like hello there, Three.js, and it being rendered. So we can get started with this bare minimum projects, and we can actually first install dependencies, and we can just go ahead and build the whole kind of canvas and start rendering throughout this canvas together using React with Three.js. So first things first, we're going to use React 3 Fiber. So as I told you before, React 3 Fiber is actually like the connection link that like links pretty much or allows Three.js to work on React. And it just like makes it look way much better. Indeed, what does this like library or kind of binding, what does it provide for us? It actually makes Three.js more of components based. So it's like more like it becomes compositional, kind of like in the behavior of compositions. So you can use Three.js instead of like the declarative API. If you go like, for example, you do new, you construct something like you construct a scene or a camera, then you can do like set position or something like that. You know, this ugly stuff to go ahead and get started or pretty much work with Three.js. But using the React 3 fiber, it's going to allow us to use Three.js, but in a way of like components. So it's going to just like turn these into like components, and whenever you render these components are going to be automatically initialized for us, which means it's going to create an instance for us. Then we can supply like whatever arguments that can be supplied through this initialization or initiation state, and we can of course control this all throughout props, which makes it super easy to control. And you can see, and as you will see throughout the video, so as we create the projects, as we actually render stuff, you're not going to see that much of complexity as you would when you just deal with vanilla JavaScript 3.js. Yes, it's just going to make it much simpler for us, and it's going to like straight to the point throughout components, and we can provide some props, and that's it. It's going to make the magic happen for us behind the scenes. Everything is being dealt behind the scenes for us. All we have to do is just like, you know, put our components together and sit and enjoy. So as I said before, first things first, let's go ahead and install the React 3 fiber. So let me go to my terminal in here, already open up another one. Let me just go ahead and close this because I don't need this anymore. I want to create a new one for you guys to be able properly to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to do yarn add, and I'm going to do at React 3 and /fiber. So this is actually the fiber that's going to allow us to use the components I talked about before. There is a second one, which is a little bit more like interesting, and it works with this one as well. And it's indeed from the same maintainer. I don't know how to spell that name actually, but yeah, he has actually a really cool libraries that you can check out here on his page. But what I'm going to use is called like Dree. I don't know if I'm like spelling this right because this is like 3 in German, so I'm not sure exactly if I'm spelling this right, but I'm just gonna, I'm gonna spell it as Dree. That's it. Pretty simple, right? So what this one allows you is actually like a set of components that are already built for us, and they are reusable, that we can use it with our Three.js through our React fiber. And it's pretty cool. For example, you can use like a camera shake, which it makes your camera like tilt here and there. If you just like, familiar with these games, horror games or stuff like that, where your camera is tilting and stuff like that, you can have these effects. You can have a bunch of stuff like orbits we're going to be using, which allows you to pretty much like, move with the mouse and move the camera and explore the world. There's a bunch of stuff in here like effects, mist, shadows, tons and tons of stuff, and even shaders. You can use those alongside that as well. So it all makes it super simple, and it gives you these components already ready made for you. All you have to do, import them, and you use them inside of your scene and inside with like Three.js, and that's it. Alright, that's sweet. So that's what we're going to be installing too. So I'm just going to copy React 3 Dree, and hopefully I'm spelling that right too. So I'm going to put it alongside that, do yarn add, go ahead and add both of these, and yeah, that should be all good to go. The other thing, which is of course optional, we're probably just going to need it once or just like twice, alright? So I'm going to use style components. You know me, I love style components. Just make it super easy to go ahead and control and put CSS and JS, and just, add some stylish stuff to your application in general. So what's I'm going to be doing in here, I'm going to do style components, and that should install for us style component as well. So as I said, I already did all of these steps again, and I installed both style components, and it did pretty much go ahead and install all the other libraries. So we are good to go in that particular part. Let me go and move back into my first terminal in here, and we are actually go ahead and get started. So as clear seeing here, I already created like a canvas container, which is just like taking full width and full height. And this is just like for taking the full width and the full height of the web page. So if you're taking a look on one of specs and elements in here, it's clear to see the root as well is actually taking full width and full height. So make sure both root, HTML, and body, all of them are taking the full width and the full height, otherwise it won't work for you. What I mean by this, make sure to go into like the index.css or whatever, and make sure that all of these elements in here, like the root elements, like the top parents, which are HTML, body, and roots, they are all taking width and height of the full web page, otherwise it won't work for you, and it will just like, it will be a little bit ugly for you to go and control this and render out the canvas. Okay, so make sure this is working properly and this is being set throughout the CSS. Sweet. So let's go ahead and get started first, and let's go ahead and start with our scene. So with the React Fiber, what we need to go ahead and get started with is actually start with building out a scene. So let me just go ahead and clear all of these. I don't need this anymore. I don't need that. All I need to do is just like my blank hello Three.js window, and we're actually good to go. So first things first, the scene we're going to be needing is actually to use a canvas, and the canvas needs to be imported from like the React 3 Fiber, the Fiber library. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the canvas. Hopefully this works with, I don't think this does work, so we need to go ahead and manually do this. I can't use the superpowers of VS Code anymore. But anyway, so we can do canvas from @React, and we can get to Fiber. Sweet. So I can go ahead and put the canvas, and make sure to put the canvas and everything, all the components that uses Three.js or React Fiber or React Tree, anything related to Three.js has to go inside the canvas. Otherwise it will fail with you and it won't work properly. Okay, so make sure that is actually working fine. And what we need to do as well, providing in here, I'm going to use suspense. And suspense is actually a React feature that allows you to fall back into some like a UI, while another piece of your React or piece of your application, which is just a piece of your UI, is being like held out, which means it's having some like asynchronous operation and it's waiting for this operation to finish in order to render something. So this just like provides you with a loading state, if you think of it. So if this kind of piece or this kind of like part of the UI is being loading, this suspense is going to provide you with a fallback. You say, oh, this is loading, or you can render out, you know, a div or a 404 page, whatever. But it's just like it's going to provide you with a fallback. And the most important part here, what we need to use it with the canvas, because the canvas most of the time needs to like import some textures, import some models, and all this stuff that, you know, works with 3D kind of stuff. And 3D stuff, like 3D models and 3D textures, are quite huge when it comes to size and bundle sizes. So yeah, falling back is very important. And make sure to put this null, because you can't render something as a div because you're already inside of the canvas. So just provide this null and you're actually in the safe place to get started. Sweet. Now let's go and create another component, and this component is going to be responsible for rendering out our earth. Alright, so let's go into the SRC in here, and I'm going to just like put, for example, components. And inside of that, I'm going to create another one. I'm going to name this earth. And inside of this, I'm going to name this index.gsx. So this is going to represent our earth, our little teeny tiny earth, and we can go ahead and get started with it. So first things first, I'm importing React, as always, and I'm going to export the function, which is going to be earth. Okay, hopefully I'm spelling earth right. I need a props there. And that's pretty sweet. Now for earth in here, actually the most fundamental thing that we need to start with is actually putting some specific mesh. Hopefully, if you're familiar already with Three.js, that will be all easy for you. If you're not, just go ahead and like try to focus closely, because they are not super complicated stuff to follow. But if you're just like totally newbie to like game development or like 3D graphics development and all that sort of stuff, and you don't know what mesh is or a vertex is and all that sort of stuff, like just down or low level basic stuff, I really recommend go ahead and just like seeing the guide Three.js is providing. There's actually a pretty basic getting started guide there, that which is just gonna pretty much explain to you like what is a mesh, what is a vertex, like how rendering works, what is WebGL, and all that sort of stuff, because those are much more like low level that you need to understand before jumping into the more like intermediate and advanced stuff and being able to follow. Even though here we're actually covering beginner to intermediate stuff, but still you need to understand those low level kind of definitions and how pretty much the whole rendering engine is actually working behind the scenes. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so as I said before, earth, we need to go ahead and render out our first thing, and we need to render our first mesh, which is gonna be just a sphere. That's it. Earth is just a big giant sphere. Even though most of the people, and I know scientifically it's not a sphere. It's more like an egg shaped. Yes, we totally agree on this, but most of the times, I mean all the times, Earth, when it comes to a 3D rendering, all that sort of stuff, it has to be rendered as a sphere, because it makes more sense and it makes it look way much better, and it just like makes it easier to manage and manipulate. And that's what I'm going to be doing right here. So let me just going to do a return, and for the return here I'm going to use the fragments, and that's just basically because I want to render or group a bunch of stuff. And you can't here, as I'm saying again, you can't use a div because a canvas can't have a div. It has to use WebGL, and it has to use like, specific context rendering. It can't use the primitive HTML kind of elements inside of the canvas. You have to go outside of the canvas in order to be able to render those. Hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go ahead and render the mesh as I said before. Now for the mesh, basically what you need to do is actually go ahead and like do, you don't need actually to import anything from the React Fiber or anything, because React Fiber, as soon as you put the canvas in here and whatever tile that comes inside of that canvas that gets rendered is going to automatically provide you with this gigantic, like kind of standard elements going to be provided on the global scope. So for example, if you're familiar with whenever you put div in here, you don't need to import div to put it, because that's already actually being available on us on the context or the global scope. And React's already familiar with that. And that's the same thing with Three.js. React is already familiar with Three.js's components that are already provided on the global context or the global states, or pretty much whatever you want to call it. Okay, so I'm going to use mesh in here, and mesh is actually just like a number of components. And one thing actually to notice in here is actually like all the components that you need to put in here on Three.js are actually lowercase or camel casing components, and they all start with a lowercase. You don't put like mesh in here like M as a capital case, because that's bad. It will just like take this as a third-party component. No, we have to put it as a small or lowercase in order to understand that, oh, this exists in the global context. So yeah, we're going to look for it in there. Sweet. So this is the mesh. Now a mesh has to have actually a couple of stuff. A mesh is just like whatever kind of arbitrary geometric or whatever something that you call it. It can be a cube, it can be like a sphere, it can be anything like a plane, whatever. So that's what mesh is. A mesh has like a set of vertices, which are just like points around the 3D space, and they just like gets connected together with specific lines. Then you can of course draw over them, and you can color them, and you can do all those sort of stuff. So that's basically what it is. A mesh just like a gigantic kind of connection between different vertices or points. That's it. Now we need to tell it like which kind of geometric we want to use, and we want to use a sphere geometric. So I'm going to do sphere geometry, and here this is actually where the interesting part comes in. So the sphere geometry in here, what it's going to tell it, it's pretty much going to go and like create a geometry, which is just sphere geometry. Of course, you know how a sphere is. It has like a radius, it has all that sort of stuff. So throughout the arcs prop in here, we can go in and provide it with that. So the arcs prop gets actually sent whenever we are actually initialized. So I said before, whenever you put in here sphere geometry, it's pretty much the same thing as we're doing 3 new sphere geometry. So like we created a new instance. So that's basically what we're doing in here. So we're actually initializing a new instance of the sphere geometry. And the arcs prop in here is actually whatever gets passed through to the constructor we are actually initializing, which is the sphere geometry constructor. So here actually, if we take a look on this, IntelliSys provides us with this. So it takes first as a radius, which is a number, which can represent the radius of the sphere, then the width segments, and the height segments. So that's are just like, segments of a sphere. If you're familiar with how spheres are actually rendered or how spheres look like in just like a geometry word, well, they're actually just like composed of width and height segments, and that's it. So the ideal way to do this, let's say I'm going to put it as 3, or I don't know, let's go and do 1. Let's start with 1 as the basic, and by default it has a 32 by 32, and that's going to make it a pretty perfect shaped sphere. So we're going to go stick with the defaults because that's the best approach to follow in this case. Sweet. Now the other thing, we need to provide it with a material, and what a material is pretty much can be like a color, it can be pretty much like how pretty much the sphere or how this 3D object is going to behave to light. So that's it. You can pretty much think of it like a material. Let's say, oh, there's this sphere which is like a metallic sphere, and metallic is like is super glossy and has this glossy material. So that's it. If you want your sphere to look glossy, you need to assign it with like a metallic material. And this metallic material, of course, is going to be defined by a custom shader. Of course, you can create your own custom materials, but likely for us, Three.js comes with its predefined materials, and it provides this with us with its predefined shaders. So we can go in and use this in pretty much the simplest way possible. Now, to get started with this one, we're going to use the mesh fang material, which is just a basic material that pretty much provides with a fang kind of typey of a material. And we can, of course, go in and tell it whatever color we want. And let's say I want my sphere to look more like a red, if that makes sense. Okay, so I want just like a red sphere, just roaming on the shiniest there, and that's it. That's all I want. So let me go in and render my earth. So go earth and put it right over there, and that should be able to render it. So if you take a look, there you go. So as you see, we got our first sphere being rendered. And if you're wondering why we don't see red, why we're saying this pitch black, it's not red, right? Even though we assigned red, because there is no lighting. And lighting is pretty much the most important thing in 3D world. If there's no light, there's no color. And if there's no light, we can't actually see anything in the world. Imagine yourself like without light. Imagine there's no key light actually pointing to my ugly face here and actually trying to actually explain something. You won't be able to see me, right? Yeah, I don't know. I'm being douchey right now, but whatever. So that's what I'm trying to explain to you. So light is very, very important in the 3D world, and it's very important on Three.js's world. And in fact, Three.js provides us with a simple way to actually go in and add light into our scene in here and be able to light the scene. So the most basic light, the lighting source you want is actually the ambient light. So it's just called like this. It's called ambient light, and it provides you with just like an ambient kind of type light. So I can go in and use an ambient light. Now for the ambient light here, what it does, it just pretty much provides a light that fills every single spot of the whole 3D world. It's not like directional, like a lamp or something. That's what we're familiar with, and that's the type of light. You can think of ambient light, it's more like sunlight because it's everywhere. Even though sunlight is not everywhere, it's more like a point light when it comes to space. But when it comes to us on Earth, we're pretty much as an ambient light. Sunlight is more like an ambient light to us because it's everywhere, literally. Sweet. So that's what I'm going to provide right here. And for the ambient light, what I'm saying in here is actually I'm going to give it, for example, there's an intensity. Okay, I want to give it an intensity of like 0.5 or something. I don't want it to be too much, just simple. And there you go. We got our red sphere pointing at our faces right now. And that's looking pretty great, right? It makes sense now. Like why red is red right now. And if you take a look on increasing the intensity, yeah, it's going to make it look a little bit more red, but we won't be able to actually notice that because there's no difference in shading or there's no shadows, and lights is just covering every single space of the word, and it all looks the same color. There's no changes. Sweet. So this is the basic scene, and this is the basic stuff that you should actually cover whenever you actually start a 3D rendering, and that's basically what you need to do, especially using React Fiber. That's it. That's all you need to do, provide to actually add a sphere into your 3D scene. How simple is that? Now, if you take a look on our sphere, now how can we make this red sphere look like Earth, right? Because Earth has a lot more interesting stuff going on than just like red everywhere. So how can we make it look like that? And this is actually going to happen using the help of textures. So anything you see in a 3D game or anything you see in a 3D world, kind of 3D rendered world, it pretty much is composed somehow, some way of textures. And textures are actually just like, 2D images that gets applied into a 3D space, and they can cover up this particular space in different like patterns, or there's actually specific methods to cover it this way. And here I already got 8K textures of our Earth. And pretty much I've been able to get these from a really cool website. Hopefully you got this. And AK, it's going to allow us to zoom in and see little teeny tiny details about our Earth, about continents, about countries, and all sort of stuff. And there's actually different type of textures in here, different types of textures. So the first most important texture is actually the color texture, and which you can of course take a look on AK, and this is what a normal texture looks like. So you got Earth in here, and that's what Earth is. That's what a geographical card looks like. There is continents in here, for example Africa, American, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's not geographical lesson for today, but whatever. So you got the point. So this is pretty much called like a color texture. And we got different types of textures said before. For example, there is the NormalMap, which actually pretty much gives you the bumpiness and makes it more realistic, where it just puts it in more bumpy. For example, where a continent is, it's pretty much a little bit higher than an ocean where the water is. So it makes it a little bit more realistic. And there's the SpecularMap in here, which pretty much gives it the glossiness and all that sort of stuff. And we're going to apply all these different kind of textures together and using some specific shaders and materials and all sort of stuff. And you're going to make it look like Earth shining up. Super sweet. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. And there's actually different stuff in there. For example, night map. So this is Earth on night, if you want to use it, but I'm not going to be using it throughout the video anyway. And there is another one which you're going to be using, which is the clouds. So those are actually clouds kind of diffusion throughout the whole Earth atmosphere. And that's what we're going to be doing, so to make it really, really realistic. So we're going to be adding all of these types of textures together to form what's called Earth. So let's go ahead and get started. And first things first, to start with this, we need to actually go in and load every single texture of these. So to do that, I need to first load them into pretty much my file in here. Use the import and everything, because React app works really well with this and imports images really well using Webpack and everything. So that's what we're going to be doing right here. So import Earth Day Map. So Earth Day Map. And I'm going to go back to, I think it's, I don't know. So I need to go back one more time, then go assets and textures. Then I can do daymap.jpg. So I need to import all the other type of textures so we can use them properly. There are actually a bunch of them. So you can, for example, there's the NormalMap, and there is the SpecularMap, and we need the clouds map. Okay, so clouds. I'm going to do Earth clouds, specular, and normal. Okay, sweet. So that's what we need in here. Now let's go ahead and use the help of React Fiber to use a custom hook made for us to actually load those textures. And of course, those textures are going to be loaded from the server once they are actually put in the public folder, because that's going to be happening here, as I said before, because this uses Webpack and everything. So that's how bundling works with that kind of stuff. So after we load this, of course, they're going to be loaded in asynchronously. We can put them directly into a material and we can render them. Sweet. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to just name this, for example, ColorMap. And I can do, the second one is a normal map. There is a specular map. And last one is there's a clouds map. And I'm going to do a use loader, which is a hook. I'm going to import it from React Fibers clears in here. So let me just put this a little bit on the top there. Now, the first one it takes what type of loader. And we have to tell it with a type of loader. And indeed, we're going to use a texture loader, which is going to be imported from Three.js. And you have to put it the texture loader, otherwise you won't know what type of loader, because there's different type of loaders like model loaders or GLTF loader and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to use it this way to load that. And here we can give it pretty much what we want to load on an array perspective. So I like the input. So it has to be the same one. So just to match this. So order has to be the same. I'm going to do Earth Day Map, and then Earth Normal Map, then Earth Specular Map, and last but not least the Earth, okay, where is that, Clouds Map. Sweet. Now let's go and use this in here, and the basic way to go and use this, we're going to use the mesh standard material, which is a third already provided with us material from Three.js. Thank you, Three.js. And this is more like a physical based rendering kind of material. So if you're familiar with this keyword, physical base rendering, or PBR, well, this material is for you. So this is basically what modern days engines, like web engines or pretty much game engines, actually go use as an approach. So this more like renders depending on the actual material that's it's pretty much being reflecting light. For example, there is actually this sphere of metallic, as I said before. So if this is a sphere of like, I don't know, wood, it would behave a little bit differently when it is metallic, because metallic is more like glossy and wood is a little bit more rough. So the light will be different whenever it hits the surface of both of different materials, right? So that's what I mean in here. So it all depends on the physical like material that is actually being hit and diffused by the light. So that's what I mean by this. So I'm going to be using this mesh standard material, and that's going to allow us to do that. And we first need to provide it with a color map. So the color map in here, we can do the color map, and we can just go straight through, provide the color map. And I think this should be called the map instead of the color map. And there is actually the normal map. So normal map. And so just like both of these can be provided in here, we can't provide much of stuff in there. And to actually use the other kind of stuff, like for example the SpecularMap, we have to go ahead and create or provide this on the mesh font material. So here I need to go ahead and clear out the color, because we don't need to put an overlay over our like earth, because we don't need to make earth look red while it's blue. Sweet. So for this one we need to do like SpecularMap, and we need to provide the SpecularMap right here. Sweet. So that's basically what we need to do for the first thing. And let's go ahead and save that. Let me go back here. And there you go. It looks pretty sweet already. And if you take a look on it, it's clear to see we can't move, of course, but it looks like Earth, right? It's a little bit closer to Earth. And yes, it does a little bit look like Earth. And this Americas, they both exist in that. So that's pretty sweet. We are actually a little bit closer to our first thing to get started with that. Now, how can we actually make a little bit more that? As clear as now, we can't pretty much go ahead and move this anywhere. It's a little bit kind of ugly, right? We can't actually move to explore the different sides of Earth, and it doesn't look like an Earth because we can't move it around. How can you actually interact with this and move the camera? Because the camera right now is actually kind of static. And this is where it comes the React 3 dry or Dree. Sorry if I'm misspelling that. But okay, so that's what we need. And actually we need to import the orbit component. So we can do orbit controls from React. So it's going to be a React 3 tree. All right. Now this orbit controls, it allows us to actually do kind of an orbit. From its name, it's pretty much obvious. So it's going to allow us to orbit through the whole world and actually move the camera however we want. It's going to give us so much control over how can we move the camera, zoom in and out, pan in and out, and all that sort of stuff. So we can go ahead and put it, and I can put orbit controls in here. And there are actually different parameters you can enable and disable to make this work. For example, I want to enable zoom. So I'm going to put this true and then enable pan. So I'll enable this true, enable rotate to rotate the actual object and make this true. Now for the zoom speed and everything, I want to limit this a little bit. I'm not sure. I'm going to give it this like 0.6. So I don't want this to a little bit more like speedy or stuff. So I want pan speed, for example, 0.5 as well. And the rotation speed, I don't know, I want to make this a little bit more realistic, so I can do 0.4 or something, okay? So that should make it look really, really great when it comes to that for orbiting in here. And there's actually another prop we need to provide, which is a target. And the target in here tells it like the main target is actually should, orbit through and rotate and all that sort of stuff, like where it should point. Now, we can have it in different places, right? Now, right now for our sphere or for our like main Earth in here, we don't have much of stuff going on, right? It doesn't have any kind of position. And now it should work because they both pointing into 0, 0, 0, 0 on X, 0 on Y, and 0 on Z axis. And they should all actually work as expected. So let me just go and show you that, guys, and see how that orbit works. Okay, compiling, that's good. And if you take a look in this, we can already orbit through this. We can zoom in, and it's clear to see it's quite high quality, right? because it's 8K and you can zoom in however you want. You can see the teeniest tiny details and it's not even pixelated or whatever. And that looks pretty great. You can see electric and all that sort of stuff. You can zoom in, you can take it over here and there. And that's Earth, right? Yeah, we can see Earth from that perspective. So let me just go ahead and take that off a little bit. And yes, we can actually play with Earth, and that's looking absolutely amazing. Sweet. So let me just go ahead and do one more thing. Now we got the actually way to zoom in and move Earth, and we can check it out as however we want. That's pretty sweet. Now what we can do actually again is actually add what's left of this, which are the clouds. Now as clear to see, it looks like Earth, but it doesn't really look like a real Earth because it doesn't have clouds. It doesn't have this way of reflecting sunlight, and it doesn't have this metallic look where it reflects some sunlight because pretty much has like, I don't know if I remember right, there's actually a 71% of Earth's surface is almost all water, right? So water actually reflects it a little bit kind of like glossy when it comes to light. So when there's a lot of light shed onto water, there's this glossiness comes through. It's not really that much of rough. It just like behaves almost like metallics and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we want in here. I want it to look a little bit more like this way and like reflect this one. So our deep consciousness or subconscious know that, oh, this is real Earth, right? That's looking like Earth. So that's what we want in here. So let's go and add first clouds and make sure clouds are actually looking absolutely amazing as we want them to be. So for that, we need to go in and add another mesh. So I'm going to add a separate mesh, and this one, okay, so let me just, so this one, I'm going to be adding the same thing. So it's going to be a sphere geometry. It's going to be the same thing as our Earth in there. They're going to have basically the same width and the same radius and everything. It's like a clone of Earth. Okay, this is sphere geometry. So when I close this, and what it needs, I'm going to use the foam material. I don't want to use like a standard or a metallic material or like the PBR material, because the font is just going to give it a single color or a single map, and that's it. It's not going to do any kind of manipulation from that side. So that's what I want from this particular perspective. So for this, I want to use the mesh font material, and for this one, I need to provide it with a map. Now the map in here are going to be the actual clouds map. Sweet. And this one we need to also provide it with some opacity. So I need to do some opacity. And from this perspective, the opacity, I want to just like make it, a little bit transparent, because clouds, and if you see the actual, where is that? The clouds texture, those are not transparent. And this is actually a JPG. Yes, because it's not PNG, it doesn't have some transparency. And those clues in here from this part where the clouds are absent, those are black spots, and we don't want to cover Earth with black. We only want to show the white. That's why we're actually providing this transparency, to get rid of the black and only leave the white and just like have it dim in through that thingy. Okay, I want to also do depth white to false, because I don't want to do any kind of depth. I want to make sure they are actually kind of identical, if that makes sense. And transparency, yes, I want to provide this to be true, because I want to allow to use transparency. Sweet. And last but not least, we need to use a side, and here we need to actually go and import this from Three.js. So I need to do actually import all as 3, and the reason I'm actually choosing to put all this capital, because that's how Three.js conventionally likes to name their main import. So I'm just like, moving with the actual river. Sweet. So we got 3 here, and I need to do double side. And that's basically what I'm gonna tell it to do. Actually, is actually render both sides, even the side is not visible to the camera, even though that's render it. It's gonna of course take a little bit of performance, but we don't have any kind of performance heavy going on. It's just like orbiting Earth. So we can work with this really, really well, and it won't have any kind of issues. Sweet. But if we leave it this way, this mesh and that Earth mesh, like both the clouds mesh and the actual Earth mesh, are actually on the same position. So one will overlap on the other, and we don't want to do that. We want to actually go in and have a little bit kind of like, position where we just like point it a little bit up. we don't want it to have it this way. So we want to make sure the clouds mesh is having a little bit more radius, or a bigger, larger radius than the actual Earth itself, because I want the clouds to be on top of the actual Earth, because that's how it works, right? Like clouds comes like above water and everything, above the continents and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty much the logical thing we want to put into place right there. Sweet. So I need to, for example, do 1.0, let's say 0.4 or 5, just a teeny tiny bit, just to see this kind of difference. And since we already have some opacity transparent going on, that should be all good. So let me just go see this, refresh, not sure, there you go. So we got some clouds being actually working, and it just like looks 100% much better than it was before without clouds. Yes, it looks way much more realistic, and it looks like Earth. Indeed, it does look like Earth. As you can see, whenever we just choose, there's clouds everywhere, here and there, and that's looking pretty sweet. I like it so far. And of course, you can tweak out a little bit from like positions and width and all those kind of parts to make it look good, depending on the scenario you want to use it. I'm just going to provide you with a bare minimum components. Then of course you can import in your projects and you can use it however you want. Sweet. Now what we want is actually to have this is Earth, right? And Earth should live on space, and we should have the whole web page in here covered in black, and we should have some like stars, shining in here, like fading out and in, and that should be space, right? So what's going to do this should be actually quite hard, because we've got everything we need, and we can just go to like the index.css, so where everything lives in here inside of like the roots and the party. So we can do, for example, go to like roots, and since roots actually is covering pretty much every single space there in React's renders, so we can go and do like a background color. So I can do background color, and we can add some background color. So this is more like a bluish kind of color. We can take it a little bit to the dark, and of course, you could probably figure out a little bit of better space color, but I mean, yeah, that makes sense right now. As you can see, it looks like a little bit more like space, but still we need some stars shining up throughout the whole area in here, and they should like fade in and fade out and all sort of stuff. And luckily for us, Dree gives us this component actually ready made for us, and that's pretty good. Of course, if I'm going to create this custom made, it wouldn't be that hard, because all you need is actually like some custom small either spheres or something, or circles, because they are not going to be visible and they should like shine up with lights, and you can render thousands of them with just like a loop function, and that's it. So yeah, you can do it this way, but I would rather go in and use like a ready-made components that has props and well tested and well made up, rather than building it from scratch. Okay, so we can go and do this right here, and we can actually go and do the stars. And I don't know if you can go and import stars. Okay, from Dree, so we can do stars from here. It's not stars, it's stars. And for stars in here, what it takes actually a couple of different simple props in here. Like for example, the radius of every single star, which is, as I said before, is going to be like more a sphere. For example, you can say, oh, each star has a 300. Like the depth of each star, like how much far away of the actual camera and everything star should be rendered. I don't know, let's say it's going to be 60 or something. I want it a little bit far, because most of the stars are far away when it comes to looking at them from a camera, from like a human perspective. And there is, for example, the number of stars, or the count. And yeah, let's say there should be 20,000 stars or something. I don't recommend going too high, because this is going to be like, not really good at performance. So just like keeping it a small number will make it look good. And the factor in here is actually the difference size factor. So it goes, for example, from 1 to 5 in a random way. So let's say I want to go from like to 7 in factor, so maximum to be 7, and it should do the job for us. For the saturation in here, I don't need any saturation, because I don't need it to be super kind of saturated, and it will look a little bit kind of shiny. So yeah, that will make it look good. And last but not least, fading. Yes, I want it to fade, which is going to automatically create this kind of looking like a star when it fades out and fading, like every single time a star dies or something, or a new star borns. You got the points. I'm not a guy who knows a lot about like how space works, but you got the point of what I'm trying to say. Sweet. If we take a look, I don't know, should refresh. There you go. We got our stars shining up, and as you see, huge number of stars. They rotate with the camera whenever we rotate that, and we got Earth actually pointing through that, and it looks absolutely amazing. I just love this, how Earth looks like in here and without stars. Now it gives it a little bit more depth because stars actually exist, and this feels more like space, right? This should feel a little bit more like space, and that should make it look good. And the last thing that would make it look definitely like space is actually the sunlight that goes straight into the Earth. And of course, once the Earth is going to orbit on itself, like every single time rotate, every single day, well, of course, light's position is going to change and day and night shifts is going to happen, if you're familiar with that. But the point in here, that light is going to make it look really good. And in fact, it's going to, since I said before, Earth is already having this kind of metallic because it has a lot of water inside of it. So yeah, that makes points, and that will make it look really shiny whenever there's light. And of course, sun is the type of light of like a point light where it shines light everywhere from its center to everywhere around it. So that's what a point light is. You can think of it as a bulb, if you're familiar with that. So that a bulb is, it's just like a point light that shines light throughout the whole room there, pretty much wherever it exists in there. Sweet. So let's go ahead and do this, and we can go ahead and add this light. It shouldn't be actually pretty bad because it all being provided with us throughout Three.js, and Three.js does a really awesome when it comes to providing this kind of ways. So we can do point light, and I need to make this camel case and smaller case. And for this one, you can provide it with color and everything. So for example, as we all know, light colors is not yellow. It's just completely kind of white, and that's what we're going to be doing it right here. Yes. So yeah, we can make it a little bit more like a yellowish kind of color. I don't know. So let's try just a little bit, teeny tiny bit, and that should make it look good already. For the position of that, okay, I want to position this a little bit far away from the center position. So this one should take a vector, and a vector in JavaScript in here in Three.js word is just like an array, if that makes sense. So the vector in here, for example, I'm going to say, this is going to point to the x-axis, 0 in the y-axis, and I'm going to give it a little bit depth on the z-axis, so it should make it look a little bit good. And the intensity side, okay, I know sun is pretty intense on Earth, so yeah, we can give it like a 1.2 because the maximum, it goes from 0 to 1 usually, but 1.2 should make it look quite intense, if that makes sense. Sweet, so that's for the point line in here. If you take a look on this, I don't know, maybe refresh to see how that does. So you see, we already got this kind of effects. So you see, this kind of light is already here. I'm not sure if this is actually familiar with you guys, but yeah, from this side there isn't much. But if you just go to this side where America lives, pretty much there is some light being shined. So we can go ahead and do this, and you can see the difference by getting rid of the ambient light, because we don't need the ambient light, and the ambient light doesn't exist in space. Right? So there's only sun being shining out the whole light it has on Earth and other. Okay, so pretty sweet. It looks pretty good. It's clear to see there's actually a dark space in here, or a dark side where they are actually sleeping at night, and there's the side where it has some light. And yeah, that's looking pretty interesting. But it's clear in here. It has some glossiness, so it looks like Earth. It really does. But I want to rather go in and add a little bit of like glossiness to make it look a little bit more like realistic and add some PBR into it, if that makes sense. So we can do the standard material, and this is what we're going to add all of that. So we can do metalness, and this one, like how much metal it is, I can do 0.4 for example, and there's roughness, so how much glossy it is. So if one, you're going to be super rough and it will look quite ugly and it doesn't represent Earth, right? So let's say it might be 0.7 or something, okay? We don't want it to be too rough. And if you take a look on it, now it's a little bit more like visible to us, and it looks 100% better, right? It looks really, really good when it comes to this. Clearly see the dark side, yes, pitch dark, you can't even look at it. And it's clear to see whenever we move toward the, the enlightened one, it's clear to see it unravels and it looks really, really cool, like a super, super realistic and super sweet. And of course, if we move this point light thingy, you will actually get this effect. And if you take a look on zoom in, actually, as this is actually an 8K texture, so it's super high resolution. It's clear to see it's super, super high. We can zoom in and we still see the teeny tiny details. And if you actually can see, whenever there's actually a light being shed in here, because we're actually providing some normal maps, we see these bumps and we see it a little bit coming up, like those bumps in here. So this makes it even more realistic. So it's clear to see those bumps in here. It makes it like feel, oh, those are stuff like, I don't know, whatever you can call it, like, patterns or textures, but yes, it looks 100% realistic when it comes to that and how lighting is being shed. Now, the last thing that you might want to add into this piece of art, it's actually auto rotating and auto orbits of the Earth on its own self, right? So we can do this using the help of the actual like frame loop, or what you can call it, the actual rendering loop. And this way we can do where is that? So we can need to actually access the mesh and we need to have a reference on this. So to reference this, actually we need to reference it on a specific variable in here. So we hold that, and wherever actually there is some frame changes, so every single frame we actually going to change the actual, I don't know, position or rotation of the Earth itself. So that's what we're going to do, and that's how we actually pretty much can do it throughout this way to pretty much rotate Earth or orbit the Earth around itself. So we can do const, and we can do, for example, let's say I'm going to do like Earth ref, and we can use ref from React, of course. Now here we need to provide it, and as soon as being initialized and created on the DOM, we can have it. So we can do Earth ref, and luckily for us, what there is actually what's called the rendering loop, where it's basically an endless loop that keeps every single frame fired up and executed, and for pretty much rendering the whole scene and updating it. So pretty much every single frame, which is 60 frames per second. So that's how much it happens. Usually that's how it is, but of course you can tweak out the FPS if you're familiar with this. So you can tweak out how many frames per second there is, but usually there is 60 frames per second, and that's how much this is going to be running. And since it's going to run every single frame, so it's going to run 60 times every single second. And luckily for us, it pretty much gives us this control throughout the React fiber, and we can use it, of course, using the hooks. So what we can do is actually do use frame, and this is going to provide us with a callback. So we just provide it with a callback in here, and this callback gets executed every single time, like every single frame, 60 times per second. That makes sense. So for this one, there's actually a couple of stuff it provides, and the most important one is actually the clock. So this clock, as soon as the initializes pretty much, or Three.js, as soon as it starts rendering, this clock is going to be initialized. It's going to like start counting from 0 to endless pretty much as soon as the application stops. So it's going to count in seconds, and more like a float number. So seconds and milliseconds give you like a precise number. So like every single second is elapsed, it's going to pretty much like bump this, the clock is going to increase, and so on and so forth. So you can imagine this as a regular clock in seconds and milliseconds. So we're going to use this value to pretty much orbit or rotate the Earth. So what I can do is actually Earth ref .current, and we can do rotation. We can do .y, for example. So we rotate the y, the y euler. So using the actual clock, and we can do, for example, const, or I can do elapsed time, and we can do clock.get elapsed time, and it's going to give us a float number and number of seconds since the clocks started pretty much. So we can do like elapsed time. And if you just like do it this way, it will be super fast. So I need to like do it like, I don't know, normalize this by 6 or something, to divide it by 6 just to slow it a little bit down and make it a little bit more realistic, if that makes sense. So okay, that should be looking pretty great actually. And if we do it this way, we got use frame and clock and everything. Now if we do mesh standard, we got the reference already there. So if we take a look on this, there you go. So you see it moves, but not as expected, because the actual earth is moving, but the clouds texture is not. So we have to have them both rotating, if that makes sense. So we can do this clouds ref, and we can do use ref, and we can do the same thing we did here. So clouds ref dot current dot rotation dot y and elapsed time. If you're wondering why did I choose the y, because the y is actually the one responsible for orbiting it on as a regular Earth. Of course, Earth doesn't orbit exactly in a y position, like on the y-axis itself, but that should make it a little bit more like clearer for us, because that's how it should look like to us as humans, or to the human eye, if that makes sense. So divided by 6 in here for the clouds ref, and we need to provide that clouds ref to the clouds. So we need to do ref, and we need to pass in the clouds ref, and that should make it look good. So take a look, there you go. It feels way much more realistic than it was before. As you can see now, the light is actually moving as Earth orbits, and it's actually turning. So as you can see, it feels more like you know, it's coming like a new day, and this is naturally how Earth is. So it just like keeps orbiting on itself, and night comes in, day goes out, and you know, just like night and day shift, and this is pretty much how it works, and this is how it happens. And it looks pretty realistic, right? It looks absolutely amazing. One side in dark, the other in shedding lights from the sunlight, of course. Of course, you can have different stuff. For example, if you like want to have a moon just following this and orbiting through Earth, yeah, you can have it. That would be really good. You can have some like small moon in here. And there's actually a cool moon texture provided from the website I've gotten here. Just like Google moon texture, you're going to find tons of them. You can use it, you can do this one, and you can practice your skills with this, and you can see how you can go ahead and use it in this awesome way. And of course, you can pretty much use it anywhere you want. And let's say, for example, we want to use this as a landing page, right? Because that's the most obvious place that you want to put a rotating Earth on itself. You know, it's tragic, right? But that's what you want to have it. And you want to have it, for example, on a landing page just to attract people and say, oh, it has some this pretty rendering stuff, and pretty much basically maybe it has some like relation to the actual topic and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we want to hear. So for this particular case, what I want to do for just a basic text on top of like Earth in here, regarding global warming and stuff like that. So let me just going to do this real quick. So what I want, first go in and disable the orbit. Okay, I don't want any orbiting anymore. Hopefully that doesn't break anything. Okay, so yeah, we can't zoom in anymore, so we have to do it ourselves, and we can pretty much have some. So let me just see what we can do for this to zoom in. Alright, so we can do some mesh, we can do some position, or just scale. Okay, I guess a scale takes a vector. So for example, we can do some scaling on 0, 0, or like 3. Let's say, how does that look like? Really unsure about this, but let me just put it on the same cloud stuff. Okay, maybe that's too much, maybe that's too little. I ain't sure about this, but okay. All right, so yeah, that's okay. Let's go and make this a position instead of a scale. So we can make this a position. We can make this a position, and indeed we can have this both positioned a little bit like closer to us. So where is our light? So the point light. So we can have, for example, this one is 3, this one is 3, and the point lights in here I can have it as 5. If that makes sense. And there you go. Now it's a little bit better. It's big enough, and it just like covers the whole thing. And you can of course move in and out. So that should make it look pretty great, right? And it gives us this really, really awesome position. So it's being centered and it turns on itself and it's being orbited and everything. So we can have some text on top of that. And for this case, what we can do, we can, for example, go to, so I want to make sure render this outside. So for example, we can name this, for example, like top section or something. And for this one, we can have like an index.jsx. So this should be like a React render, right? So I'm going to export a function, top section and everything. And what I can do, so I can do, for example, top section container. And of course, you can figure out however you want to do this. I'm just going to give you like an example, just a quick example how to use this properly. So for the top section container, what I wanted to have is actually being cover the whole thing in here, but because we already have some canvas, so how can we properly align this and make it look as we want it to be? It just basically we want to do this in like have the canvas in the background or have the text in the top section container come in the foreground. So it has to be on top of this. So it has to have like a top position or an absolute position, sorry, or a fixed position if you want to. So let's say I want this to be an absolute positioning and I want this to have full width and full height. Okay, that should make sense. Now top should be 0, left should be 0. So I don't want to like move in here and there or anything. Just like all 0 should make it look good. And I want to give it some background. So I'm just going to do like some black background. And we might want to do, I don't know what the best background should be. I want to decrease the opacity as much as possibly could. So just to have some like top layer of it. That should make it look good. Hope so. So I want to have some colors in there. I want to do some like title, or want to call it logo, maybe. So an H1, I don't want any margin, so 0. And what I totally remember here, we need to do display flex, and I want to align items both. Okay, I want a flex direction to be column. That's the first most important part. And what I want on top here, I want to align them to the center, only horizontally, if that makes sense. Now for the logo, I want to do color to be completely white, font weights, okay, I want to use 700 if available, and font size I wanted to say like 30 pixels, so because I want this to be gigantic, right? So I want this as big as possibly could. From the logo. And what we can have as well, some slogan text just beneath it. So slogan, it can be an H4 or something, just a little bit smaller. Okay, so margin 0, color same thing, font weight probably same thing as well, and the font size, of course, it should be a little bit smaller than that. And without forgetting about the margin, so margin top, let's say I wanna have like 10 pixels, 1 em margin, I don't know, we will see. So here, what we need to return is the top section container, and I want to do logo. And for the logo in here, for example, I can do like global warming or whatever. Of course, you can choose the right way for it. And for the slogan, yeah, I've googled some slogans in here. There's tons of them regarding global warming, actually. So people are really, really hating about global warming. So I don't know. So let me just. I think that's looking cool because it has some cool wording in the middle right here. Maybe, yeah. Let's try this one and see how this goes. Okay, so let me just go to the out.jsx. So outside of canvas, make sure it's outside of the canvas, and we can have, for example, top section, and we can render it. And I think the top section hasn't been. Okay, so lately it's not actually working pretty great with VS Code or import. Not sure what the latest update did to break this, But yeah, we got some text in here. It's not looking as anticipated to be, of course, but we can of course have it look a little bit better. We can do some stuff to make it look a little bit better. So for example, 55 pixels from the logo, 30 here. Maybe you want to do some padding from the top. Okay, I want to do some padding. I want to do like 20% padding from the top. I don't know, z-index. Do I need some z-index to make this look good? On top, yes, I might do. And I think this is not looking as we want it to be. I think this maybe is doing it. Maybe we need to increase this a little bit better, or a little bit more. I think a global warming is more like a greenish thing, is it? I'm not really that guy who knows a lot of stuff about these kind of stuff, to be honest, but alright, maybe I think the bluish color we had before is much better than all of these. So maybe that should make it look good. Maybe we need to move this a little bit to the top, like 15 or something, or 13. Okay, and we need to do 60 pixels. I don't know. I mean, that text should be so big, right? And the text beneath it, keep it cool for safe living. I don't know. Maybe that should be a little bit kind of bigger. Okay, that doesn't need to be bigger. I'm sure about this, and that should only have like 10 pixels. Okay. Yeah, pretty sweet. And we can pretty much like have some text beneath that. And look, how does that look like? Even what we can have it as a landing page, and how does it make it feel? For example, we can have some button to click and to pretty much like help us achieve or cool off the word, or whatever pretty much like a cool words. We can add all of these in here. For example, we can do paragraph, and we can do styled.p, and I can say, for example, margin top to be like 1 EM maybe, color completely white, font size as 20 pixels maybe, and line height, I want to have 1.5 line height between each line and another. And the font weight, we can do 500 maybe. Alright, so let's see how that paragraph should look like. So paragraph, and we can do like, for example, you can help us cool off our word and have it go back to its base state ever by donating, for example. So for example, we have like this charity website that donates to global warming, and just like as you know, raising donations to pretty much fix this global warming thing and have more research, and just like basically have the money to do and fight global warming in general. So having it this way with this cool background and Earth orbiting, for example, you can have different effects. For example, you can have these custom shaders that makes this Earth on fire basically. I know that's a lot of possibilities. I'm really like exploring all of that, but I just didn't want to go like through these details because every single detail is a little bit different than the others. I just want to give you the whole kind of like openness and like whatever you want to do with this, you can find on my GitHub and you can of course use it. But let me just go complete this and see how it does by donating to help fix our only word and our, I don't know, I'm just like being a writer right now. I don't know, I don't want how to light or something. Sorry if I'm being ridiculous, but so in our beloved Earth, Okay, maybe, I don't know. Okay, that's too much. I need to go in and take this a little bit teeny tiny, and I need to introduce a maximum width to for example, I can do like 40%, is it? And I do like text align. Okay. Alright, so that is kind of like aligning text to the center, and that's 40%. That may be too much. Maybe I don't need to align text to the center. Maybe just to the start. Okay, that doesn't look good. Center it is, and center it is. Maybe we have to have. Okay, so I don't know. We can add some other blah 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 whatever in here. I can, for example, add those words here. Let the eyes. I'm just gonna copy this from Google, whatever. I'm just trying to being ridiculous, just to make this style look as I want it to be, right? So here, and for example, you can have like a small button that you can click down there, and I'm not really satisfied about how that should look like and everything. I mean, that's still a little bit kind of gigantic text, is it? Yeah, I think that's a much better and much more readable thing. And of course, you can have this really cool button that you can click in, and it does a really good job. For example, I can do like name this donate button, and we can do like style dot button, and we can get rid of like the outline, none, border, none, and background, for example, color is gonna be like a greenish kind of color. I don't know, maybe this color here will make it good. So color, you're gonna be white. Font size, I wanted to do like 16 pixels. Font weight, 500. I don't know, maybe the colors or the border radius should be something like 3 pixels. Maybe, and we need some padding from left and right. For example, I want to do like 14 pixels padding from left and right, and from the top and bottom I want to do like 8 pixels, which is almost like half. And okay, let me see how that button looks like anyway. And I want to have some margin, so margin top is definitely like a 2 AM or 3 maybe. Okay, so donate button, donate, save the word. Okay, that's a big word, big sentence. Okay, I'm just gonna do donate. Maybe that's good. Yeah, and that's giving us this cursor. It's not looking as interactive as I want it to be. Should be the cursor that makes it look good. And here, I mean, 700 should make it look much better. And this should be 1 EM or more. Okay, that's a 10 pixel. It doesn't feel like a 10 pixel thing. It doesn't feel like should do that. And what I can of course do, I can do like some border, 2 pixels, solid, and for now they can be transparent. And of course I can add some hovering color just to make it look cliche. Of course, you want your donate button to be super cool, and whenever people click on it, they see like really awesome styles and really awesome effects going on here and there. So that's what I'm trying to do in here. Let me add some transition to all to 250 milliseconds and ease in and out. And for that particular case, what I want to do in more particular is I want to have some like background dash color. I want to make this transparent, okay? And for the border, I want to make them the same, solid, and I want to make them the same color I used on top there. Alright, maybe that will look good. Yes, no. Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's doing the job. It's not the perfect thing I've ever made on a button, but yeah, that's just a quick button kind of design. Okay, 8 pixels. Okay. Alright, maybe that's looking pretty great when it comes to donating in here. And they can click on donate and they can do their donation, and that should make it look good. Now, it's much better. It looks a little bit more like a interactive. I need to remove the, the exclamation mark. That doesn't look really good. And yeah, we got donates. Maybe the color isn't that good. I mean, that's what I'm feeling. The color is definitely not really that good. And now, it's much better. Yay. So yeah, we go and hover over that, we get this. As you see, looks amazing. I actually love this kind of idea of having this as a landing page, for example, and you can have it as that, and it all being rendered in 3D, and people are gonna just come in through in here and say, oh, that's really cool, that's a space, that's Earth, and that's about global warming, and they read your testimony in here, read your long, ugly paragraph maybe, and they say, oh, that's pretty cool, let's go ahead. Oh, maybe it's going to donate to global warming, that's a good cause. Maybe you can point them into another page to go through and read detailed about global warming. Maybe you can have a list of what global warming could cause us and could cause the Earth itself in the upcoming decades or something like that. That's a lot of stuff to do, but I'm just going to give you the idea in here, and hopefully it didn't actually take you too much. Of course, you could have pretty much completely skip that part, but I hope you guys actually enjoyed this one. And yeah, I hope you actually enjoyed this, putting 3D with React 3D, React Fiber, and Three.js most importantly. So if you actually like this type of video tutorials, most importantly about 3D and having all of that, I actually really enjoy about 3D works and all of that. Indeed, actually before going into web development more intentionally, I was a game developer and was more like a 3D kind of developer where having it low level in the engines and game dev engines and all sorts of stuff. So I hope you're very happy to do this kind of series in here in Three.js on the browser for you guys to actually find something helpful. So as I said before, hope you guys enjoyed it, and without further ado, I'll see you all in the next ones.